Okay, last section. One of the big themes that you can't not talk about when you're talking about the early part of the 19th century like this, especially the 1820s and 30s, is the rise of Andrew Jackson and the emergence of the Democratic with a big D party. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail when it comes to the emergence of party politics, Democrats, Whigs, Republicans. I'm here to kind of point out how Sam Patch relates to all of this stuff. But the one thing that I would hope that you take away from reading Chapter 10 in your textbook, and certainly the videos, particularly Lesson 15, is that Andrew Jackson was a politician of the people, a populist, if you will. He's a fascinating individual. He started out life very humble beginnings, and he was the ultimate success story. Not only did he get really rich, he became president of the United States. And I think, anyway, that a lot of people, especially people like Sam Patch, saw elements of themselves in Andrew Jackson. He was the American dream. He proved that America was the exception to the rule. And he was a feel-good story to some extent. And a lot of people supported him because they saw a lot of themselves in Andrew Jackson. Now, what does Andrew Jackson have to do with Sam Patch? Well, again, how do you think that middle class or rich people viewed what Sam Patch was doing? People like Sam Patch, generally speaking. Well, if you read Sam Patch in its entirety, you find out that they weren't very much in favor of the Sam Patches of the world. As a matter of fact, a lot of the upper middle class people viewed him as a danger. He could corrupt America and turn it away from its moral fabric and its good hard work ethic and make it become morally suspicious and jeopardize that hard Protestant work ethic. More importantly, people like Sam Patch were associated with the quote-unquote mob. I'm not talking about the mafia. I'm talking about what historians and people like Thomas Jefferson referred to as tyranny of the majority. Can you think of something that has been wildly popular but has also been very, very bad in the grand scheme of things? Think about something like what Frederick Douglass is talking about, slavery. It's once upon a time in American history that nobody could have thought anything in America would be worth doing without the institution of slavery. It was that important to the American economy. Slavery was a wildly popular institution and also simultaneously an evil institution. Now, this relates to Sam Patch because a lot of the people that were highly critical of Sam Patch thought he was dangerous, learned to associate him with the followers of Andrew Jackson. Let me give you a quick example. Flip to page 92. There was a newspaper writer, a guy by the name of, what was his name? Stone was his last name. I believe it was Andrew Stone. Anyway, he wrote for these business newspapers that obviously appealed to people like the factory owners and certainly the upper middle class in places like Paterson or Rochester. Anyway, he was also very highly critical of people like Sam Patch. Let me show you what I mean. That first full paragraph on 92, Stone soon found better uses for Sam Patch. He had already learned to identify Patch with the followers of Andrew Jackson who were upending the Founders' Republic and replacing it with a noisy, plebeian mass democracy. Now understand that there's a few connections here. First of all, we're talking about a time period, the early 1800s, where just about all white males are getting the right to vote. It hadn't always been that way, right? There was once upon a time that you needed to have land or have some sort of financial interest in order to participate in the democratic process. That had changed, and when it changed, similarly, according to Stone, it brought in all these other questionable voters. Is that really somebody? People like Sam Patch, are those really people that you want having a decision in who becomes the next president of the United States? Secondly, even progressive-minded people like Thomas Jefferson believed that there should be a level of deference involved in American democracy. In other words, sure, everybody should have a vote, But the leaders, in other words, the people that are vying for those votes, should be plucked from the rich classes, from the upper middle class classes, because for a lot of reasons that Jefferson believed to be obvious, they were best suited to lead the country. Anyway, people like Stone are raising question marks around whether or not people like Sam Patch were qualified to vote, and the problem of tyranny of the majority. Now, I'm fast forwarding a lot. There's a lot of valuable information in the rest of the book, but for the time being, because we're a little bit pressed on time, I want you to flip to page 170. Again, one of the things that Chapter 10 is going to introduce you to is the idea of the rise of popular parties, Democrats, Whigs, later on Republicans. Look at the top of page 170. The genteel circles that included the Flockuses and the hasty Pudding were the minority within the Whig Party, a counterbalance to Andrew Jackson's Democratic Party. Northern Whiggery found its core constituency among an emerging middle class that called itself quote-unquote respectable. In other words, the exact opposite of Sam Patch. Middle-class Whigs embraced democratic ambition and the self-made man, but they knew that the free individual could be dangerous, and they insisted that ambition be acted out within a disciplined and domestic bourgeoisie. In other words, within a middle-class setting. In other words, people like Sam Patch were dangerous, and why would you want those people out there making decisions that are going to have an impact on middle-class life? Let me ask you something. When it comes to elections, who really determines the outcome? What demographic of Americans really are influential when it comes to determining the outcome of an election? Generally speaking, it's not the poor. Generally speaking, it's not the super wealthy. And the overwhelming reason for that is because they don't have a lot of numbers. Most people in America are not, working poor. Most people in America are not super rich. So that means it's right in the middle, a great big huge middle that determines the elections. Think about who it is that politicians appeal to. Think about what would happen if someone like Barack Obama or Mitt Romney or any political candidate for that matter showed up to a campaign speech in a Bentley, showed up, at a campaign rally in the middle of Oklahoma wearing a three-piece Armani suit and, using $10 words to speak to the crowd. I'm not insulting the people of Oklahoma or anywhere for that matter. What I'm saying is you don't see that happening. I mean, generally speaking, when they show up in a Chevrolet truck, or, they show up with maybe a coat but blue jeans on. And what do you think the reason that they do that? Well, they're trying to relate to you, the common person, even though they really don't have a lot to relate to you with, right? I mean, generally speaking, most politicians are coming from the upper middle class, and in some cases, the financial elite. So that begs the question, why do they do what they do? Again, we can see a direct connection to Sam Patch. Flip to page 177. This is going to be a little bit difficult for you to find. It's toward the, it's in right there in the middle of the page, but toward the bottom of that first full paragraph. It reads, somewhere between Buffalo and London. Do you see that? Somewhere between Buffalo and London, it seems, the Yankee Sam Patch had merged with the Western frontiersmen to form an all-American democratic hero. Steadfastly brave, capable of great mayhem, crudely funny, governed by a born democratic transcendent knowledge of right and wrong, and prone to begin his sentence with, well, I reckon. Is that the kind of speech that you generally associate with people that went to Harvard or Yale or the University of California at Berkeley or the University of Texas? Generally speaking, no, they come across much more sophisticated than, well, I reckon. But think about this. Do politicians use a vernacular style of language, in other words, a slang style of language, to communicate their message with the masses? Absolutely. I can name several examples off the top of my head, but pay close attention to the way that a politician speaks in the Deep South, his dialect, I mean, or her dialect, versus the way that he would speak or she would speak on the West Coast. There's a pandering to the crowd. It goes back to this time period in American life because people like Sam Patch were considered the quote-unquote real America. Those were the quote-unquote people, and those were the people that Andrew Jackson really promised that he was going to represent. He was going to be the people's politician. Now, just for fun, and because it is also useful, I think, I want you, last exercise for the day, flip to page 181 of your text. Again, there's a picture on it, so you should be happy about that. Look at the picture. It's a portrait of Andrew Jackson, and he's riding a horse. Now, look at the caption next to the picture. Andrew Jackson on Sam Patch by Ralph Earl. Sam Patch was Andrew Jackson's horse. Do you think Andrew Jackson, the President of the United States, was influenced by the actions of people like Sam Patch? How? Why? Well, the idea is he became an American folk hero. He was more than just a celebrity. He became intertwined with the culture of America, the quote-unquote real America, and you begin to see it emerge into popular politics. And what people like Andrew Jackson are doing when they name their horse Sam Patch is they're paying homage to that little guy spirit, the idea that anybody can make it in America. These are only a few examples. Certainly, you're not limited to the ones that I brought forward for you. I was just sort of trying to help you uncover some food for thought, really, when it comes to writing paper 2. Certainly, there is an infinity of other examples that you could have used if you'd like. I'd like you to think critically about the information that you've been given, and if you have any individual questions, feel free to email me. For right now, push yourself in finishing up Sam Patch and begin to really, really think about the centrality of that question.